Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. In today's video we discuss what head style is right for your body type and face shape. As you can imagine, people have all kinds of different heads and head shapes with sizes and unique features. When we dress, we always try to highlight the attractive features and flatter or improve the look of the areas that are not so advantageous. It's the same thing with hats. Not every hat is suited to every face shape and body type. Sadly, this kind of knowledge has vanished from societies, and even at a hat store, oftentimes they won't be able to tell you about it. So how come I know about it? I have vintage hat books and magazines, and I went through them and saw great discussions of hat retailers, and so today I'm going to share all that knowledge with you. First of all, let's talk about hats for larger gentlemen. If you, for example, wear a little one that looks like this, it makes you look even bigger. If you have a small hat like this one with a not so wide crown and a very short brim, it makes the person look automatically bigger. So that's something you should always avoid. On the other hand, a larger hat makes everything more proportional, more suitable, and the wearer doesn't look oversized. The same is true for the headband. Ideally, you go with something quite wide that has a very low contrast to the head, ideally in the same color. Something like this would be wrong because it's contrasting and too slim. Ideally, you want to choose a crown that is not too high, but more of a medium height, with a pinch, not so much in the middle, because you want to avoid a pointy look. You much rather want to go for a little pinch more towards the sides that is not too accentuated, because then it's a more harmonious look with your fuller body. If you're a bigger gentleman and you want to snap your brim down, that's okay, but rather than having just a slight snap, try to snap it all the way down and get a really deep snap. That way it suits your silhouette more. The brim should be rather wide, at least 2.5 inches, which is about 6.25 centimeters. Fedoras are a great hat for larger men, and so are Homburg hats with a certain size. Like I said, choose the headband ideally in a color very similar to your hat, so there's a low contrast. Next up, let's talk about hats for the short, slim, or the modest man. If you're shorter, you'll always benefit from wearing a hat because it elongates your body and makes you look taller. Rather than having a rather wide crown, it pays to have it pinched to a point because it just flatters your short silhouette more. Also, rather than going with a tone-in-tone headband, it pays to switch it up for something that's contrasting. If you're shorter, you always want to avoid to have your brim snapped and much rather have it face up. The simple reason for this is when a viewer looks at you and your brim is curled up or sideways, it gives a perception of elevation and height, which is exactly what you want. Also, rather than going with the wide brimmed hats, it pays to go with something shorter. Again, pinch on top works, and the higher the crown, the better. Ideally, you want a brim that is less than 2 inches or 5 centimeters. However, if it gets too short and the crown gets too low, you may appear like a boy, so always try to go for that high crown and that slim, curled up brim. If you take a big hat with a wide brim and a tall crown, it makes the wearer look even smaller, which is something you always want to avoid. Next up, let's talk about hats for the tall and thin man. Ideally, you don't want to accentuate your height even more, which means don't go for high crowns. Instead, go for medium to low crowns such as this one. You also want to opt for a contrasting headband because it visually separates the top part of the hat from the bottom part, and so overall it makes you look shorter than you are. Of course, you don't look short, but it just looks more harmonious on your hat. The brim should be about 2 inches or 5 centimeters wide, and you definitely want to snap it down. Also, rather than wearing your head straight, it can pay to simply tilt it to one side for a more elegant look that's more harmonious and proportional. In a nutshell, if you're tall and slim, you should avoid tall crowns and matching headbands. Instead, go with something contrasting. Likewise, don't wear a short brimmed hat that is curled up because it makes you even look taller. Instead, go for a somewhat wider snap brim hat that is more appropriate. And that little tilt just helps to tie it all together. Now that you know what kind of hat suits what body type, let's talk about facial features. If you have a big nose, the most important thing is the width of the brim. You want something that's at least as wide as your nose, so usually about 2.5 inches or more. If you go with a custom hat, you may even decide to have a brim that's wider in the front than in the back. If you get something off the rack, that's not an option you have. Rather than having it curled up, you definitely want to snap it down. Rather than going for a very pointy pinch, go for something that's a little wider. Slim brims that are snapped up or just slightly snapped down are your enemy because they will just accentuate the size of your nose. If you have a receding chin, go with hats that are not too extreme. A hat can't really help to make the chin disappear, but it can help to level everything and make it look harmonious. So that means opt for a hat with a medium crown and a slight pinch that is not too pointy but also not round. Go for a medium wide brim that is slightly snapped to the front. Again, it's very flattering to tilt the hat slightly to one side. Definitely make sure to avoid a big hat and a full crown because that will just highlight your receding chin. Likewise, don't snap your hat too much because it's not an advantageous look for you. Now, if you have chiseled features, you want a hat with a slight pinch on the crown that is not too small and you want a nice deep snap. It's definitely best to not tilt your head, but keep it straight so everything looks more proportional. In order not to highlight your chiseled features, I'd urge you to stay away from a very tall crown or a very slim brim. So what about men with round faces? Similar to those who have a stronger build, it pays to go with something that is not too slim. In terms of crown height, go with something medium and a matching headband that is not too small. A larger brim works better for you, so don't get anything under 2 inches or 5 centimeters. I'd even go to at least 2.5 inches or 6.25 centimeters. If you like to snap your brim, a Fedora hat is the right choice. Otherwise, you can also go with a Homburg hat. If you're a man with a round face, avoid getting hats that are too small. You don't want something that has a really pointy crown, and you also don't want to have a very slim brim that is not snapped down all the way. It just makes you look goofy and disproportionately large. Now, if you have protruding ears, it's very important that you have a wider brim that is snapped down and not snapped up. The brim is so important because it doesn't highlight the size of your ears or the shape, but it rather helps to cover them up. Opt for a wider crown that is not too pointy, although a little point is all right. Also, go with a wide headband that's ideally somewhat contrasting. Because of your ears, it really pays to not just snap down the head in the front, but also in the back. If you have protruding ears, you definitely want to avoid small heads with shorter brims and anything that is pointed up. Because of that, a Homburg hat is not the right hat for you because it's curved up and it just highlights your ears and they just stand out and it's just not a flattering look. The most important thing is that you get a wide brim that is always snapped down. So now that I've discussed the different options for body types and face shapes, you may wonder what happens if I get conflicting information. First of all, I suggest you go with the facial features first because the head is closest to the face. Next up, look at your body type. For example, if your face shape calls for a tall crown, but you're also a slim and tall man, maybe bring the crown height down so it doesn't accentuate your height even further. Also, maybe go with a contrasting headband so it visually separates the top part from the head and the bottom, which makes it look shorter. What about hats for a big head? Ideally, you want something that is proportional to your size, so don't go with something too small, but rather with a nice sized hat and with a nice pinch on top. You also want to go with a headband that's not too wide, but also not too slim. You can have it slightly snapped down in the front and snapped up in the back. It's always good to tilt the head to the side slightly. It just makes it look more elegant. Same is true for snapping up the front part of the brim. Makes your head even look bigger. So if you have a big head, avoid a wide crown, avoid a large contrasting headband, because they're both things that make your head look even larger. Overall, it really pays to experiment with different head shapes, which is most easily done at a head store because there you get the full selection. If you buy online, it may look great in the picture, but it may not be great on your head. Personally, I think it's okay to have a range of different hats for different purposes in slightly different shapes, because depending on the outfit you have, the hat can also have a different appearance and impression on others. The good thing is, if you follow these rules, you will end up with a hat that flatters your face and your body, and you can focus on things like the edge finishing, or the color, or maybe the material. Do you want a velour? Do you want a hair felt? Maybe a wool felt hat or a Panama hat? If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you like our video guide on Fedora hats and flat caps here. In today's video, I'm wearing a hat from Rockel in a very nice color, which I find hard to describe. However, it works well with my jacket. It's a snap brim hat with a finished edge and a crown that's not too extreme. Personally, I'm about 6 foot tall, I'm not slim, I'm not overly big, and so I find I can wear hats with a contrasting as well as with a matching headband. The jacket I'm wearing is a brown and off-white houndstooth, which is made from Harrison's, and it's a nice wool flannel. It's part of a suit, but here I'm wearing just a jacket. It's combined with a white dress shirt with a light blue overcheck, and with that I combine a silk knit tie in light blue and navy blue. That way I pick up the color in the shirt, but I add a nice texture. The tie is made out of 100% silk and knitted on a 100-year-old machine by Ford Belvedere. I designed it myself, and you can find it in our shop here. The pocket square I'm wearing is a navy blue wool challis with blue dots, which was printed in England, and it goes well with my tie as well as with my navy blue corduroy pants and my shadow striped socks in navy and blue from Fort Belvedere. My shoes are chocolate brown Oxfords with a medallion cap toe that almost look like a hole cut, but they're not. The brown tone of the shoes goes well with the brown of my belt, which I think I bought in Spain, and it's a woven belt mixed out of canvas and leather. To add a little something special to my outfit, I decided to go with a boutonniere, which is a vintage accessory that dapper men would always wear. However, it's so difficult to find those little accessories today, especially at florists, and therefore I decided to design my own, made out of silk that will never wilt and you can wear all the time. Whenever you wear a hat, it's a great accessory because both of them go really well together, and once you have those outfits, I'm sure you'll get complimented a lot.